Great dialogue is never just about the words. It's about what's going on beneath them. And it should amplify the plot, not explain it. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Let's be honest. Writing dialogue can feel deceptively simple. After all, it's just people talking, right? But I've read far too many stories where the characters are recapping the plot or spelling out their feelings to another character like they're in therapy. And these are long scenes where the dialogue is pure exposition. The dialogue quickly falls flat. It stops sounding like real people. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about what good dialogue actually does, because it's not just there to fill the silence between actions, and it's not to explain the story. When it's done well, it works on multiple levels, often saying more in what's unsaid than what is said. So in this episode, we're going to look at common pitfalls like info dump dialogue and perfectly polished dialogue where the characters are too self-aware and too articulate. And I'll show you how to write conversations that carry emotional weight, deepen your characters, and spark new turns in your story. I'll give you things to avoid and what to do instead so you can write believable, compelling dialogue. So let's get right to it. First, let's talk about what dialogue is for. What is the actual job of dialogue in your story? Well, it's not just for characters to say things. It's not just to have them talk. Good dialogue does at least one of these three things. Number one, it reveals character. Number two, it builds or releases tension. And number three, it moves the plot forward. Now, the best dialogue does all three, but even hitting on one or two is a major win. Here's the thing. Dialogue is a storytelling tool. It's not just characters talking to one another. It shows us who a character is, what they want, how they feel, and most important, what they're hiding. It's also where we, as readers, learn what's at stake without being told directly. So dialogue is an effective way to show and not tell. So here's what to avoid. Number one, avoid the info dump dialogue. One of the most common mistakes I see with dialogue is that characters are too direct. They spell out the plot. They rehash events we've already seen. Sometimes, especially near the end of a story, characters will sit down and walk through everything that's already happened as if recapping the novel for each other. Or one character will launch into a long passage of dialogue about their childhood, even though the story has already covered those moments. It's meant to be a big emotional reveal or some kind of closure, but there's nothing new. It's just a summarized version of what we already know. So the plot ends up being entirely told through the dialogue rather than unfolding through action, subtext, and emotional turns. And these scenes go on and on and on. So the plot is told almost entirely in dialogue. And that's exactly what you want to avoid. The words don't feel right. They don't feel like human conversation that's full of subtext, tension, and the rhythm of real speech. The dialogue is simply an exchange of information. It's targeted to the reader rather than shaped to the needs of the characters and the needs of the story. There are two common ways this happens. The characters get together in a room and talk about the plot rather than act it out. Or they simply recap what just happened, either what happened in an earlier scene or what happened deeper in the past, or to recap the entire story. So tip number 1, don't use dialogue to recap the plot or replace the action. Sometimes in the final scenes, two characters, whether they're sisters or lovers, will talk for pages and walk through everything that happened over the course of the novel. It's meant to be closure or a moment of truth. But even if the other character wasn't privy to that character's past, the readers have already lived through it. There's no new insight, no emotional twist, no revelation. It's just pure summary. And summary is not seen. It's not dramatic. The scene falls flat because the characters aren't moving forward. They're just narrating what we already know. So instead of using dialogue to look backward, use it to push the story forward. If we've already seen it happen, don't let your characters repeat it in conversation. Use dialogue to reveal what's unknown, create new tension, or challenge what the reader thinks they know. Dialogue should always have some element of conflict. That doesn't mean it's explosive or argumentative. Great dialogue is never just about the words. It's about what's going on beneath them. And it should amplify the plot, not explain it. So let the characters disagree about the past. Use the conversation to show different perspectives or misunderstandings. Okay, misstep number 2, speaking in perfect sentences. Often characters are too articulate. They're too self-aware. And when they're too articulate, there's no tension. There's nothing for the reader to participate in. Part of the thrill of reading is filling in what's not said. When you leave nothing to the imagination, when you feed too much to the reader, it just becomes information, not story. Dialogue is never a faithful rendering of the way humans really speak. The challenge is that it should simulate real talk, but at the same time, it should waste no words. Great dialogue is crafted. Real people speak in fragments, contradictions, and tangents. They misinterpret. They don't directly answer a question. They deflect. They rarely say what they mean. So sometimes you want to think of the thing your character doesn't want to say and get at it aslant. Here's a great example from The Hunger Games. Katniss and Peeta have survived the Hunger Games, but just barely. Throughout the games, Katniss played up a romance between them as a strategy to gain audience favor and sponsors. Peeta, on the other hand, wasn't acting. His feelings were real. In a high-stakes twist, the Capitol announced that two tributes from the same district could win together. This allowed Katniss and Peeta to team up in the arena and protect each other. But when they're the last two standing, the rule is cruelly reversed, and this forces them to choose. One must kill the other. Instead, Katniss proposes a double suicide with poisonous berries, forcing the Capitol's hand. Not wanting to lose both victors, the Capitol halts the games and declares them both winners. It's a public victory, but a private reckoning. Katniss knows her act of defiance has angered President Snow, and she's unsure how much of what happened between her and Peeta was real or just performance. So at the end, Peeta and Katniss process the games emotionally without recapping what already happened. Here's the dialogue. "What happens when we get back?" he asks. I shrug. "I don't know. I guess we try to forget." "I don't want to forget," he says. There's no response. We just sit there in silence. Okay, So notice the dialogue is loaded with what already happened. They don't need to recap it. They don't need to revisit it. And that brings me to key point number 3, subtext. Here's where things get really interesting because in great dialogue, what's said is only half the story. Dialogue is useful for getting across what is not said, the subtext. Often, the most powerful lines are the ones that don't say everything outright. They hint, they dodge, they leave something unsaid. Subtext is the emotional undercurrent, the thing your characters are really saying beneath the words. And when it's done well, it makes the scene feel layered, alive, and full of tension, even if the characters are barely speaking. So back to the Hunger Games. Let's look at the subtext. The moment between Katniss and Peeta is quiet. It's sparse, but emotionally, it's loaded. So let's break down the subtext. What happens when we get back? Now, on the surface, Peeta is asking about logistics, but really, he's asking, what are we now? Will we still be Peeta and Katniss? And she says, I guess we try to forget. Now, Katniss avoids the emotional heart of the question. Her answer is about the trauma of the games, yes, but also maybe about wanting to forget the confusion around their relationship. She's retreating from the complexity of what just happened. And he says, I don't want to forget. Now, Peeta isn't retreating. He's clinging to what they had. He doesn't want it to be reduced to survival or strategy. This is the first time we feel him express a quiet plea for truth. And then we have the silence that follows. It's heartbreak. It's fear. There's no real resolution, no mutual understanding, just tension and ambiguity. It's beautiful and painful. This moment is powerful because it shows how dialogue can be sparse but emotionally loaded. Each line does more than speak, it reveals. Now, if you're starting to realize that your dialogue might be doing too much or not enough, I have something that will help you put these ideas into practice. It's a free worksheet I created called 5 Exercises to Master Dialogue. These are practical, focused writing prompts to help you build tension, experiment with subtext, shape your scenes, and revise bloated dialogue into something tight and compelling. You can download this worksheet at nancypanuccio.com/dialogue. Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/dialogue. I'll link in the show notes. Okay, here's the big idea I want you to walk away with. Dialogue isn't just an exchange of information. It's an exchange of desire, fear, power, and vulnerability. It's not what your characters say. It's what they mean. It's what they're hiding and what they hope the other person doesn't find out. So go back to one of your scenes this week and ask, what does each character want in this moment? What are they afraid to say? And where could you say more with less? What's left unsaid? What does your character avoid or deflect in this conversation? What is your character hoping to hear but not directly asking? And how can silence act as a response? What's emotionally at risk for each character at this moment? And what does the tension between characters reveal about their relationship? So, to recap, in today's episode, we looked at what dialogue is really for. Not just for characters to say things, but to reveal who they are, create tension, and move the story forward. We talked about why recapping the plot in dialogue drains the momentum, why characters who speak too clearly or too much can flatten the emotional stakes, and how rhythm, silence, subtext, and even the length of a line can completely shift the emotional weight of a scene. Dialogue works best when it feels honest, but also when it leaves space for the reader to lean in and infer what's really going on. The purpose of dialogue is to amplify your plot, not explain it. Again, to help you write stronger dialogue, download your free worksheet, 5 Exercises to Master Dialogue, nancypanuccio.com/dialogue. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.